Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United show. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brown. Joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes, on Tuesday, mate. We did Tuesday last week and Friday after games. So we are doing this after a very pleasing second half against Wolves, 4-1. I think any time United score 4 goals in an away game in the Premier League, you can't be holding your nose. You can't be
Yeah.
looking for negatives. We'll talk about both the positives and negatives from that game. But look, as bad as Wolves are, Jamesy, nobody was battering them this season. Their biggest defeat was against City, 4-0, right? And so nobody was battering them. If you look at their most recent results, they're defeats, but they're narrow defeats. Um, so you know, I'm really happy with what I saw second half yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, not to big them up much because they are, as far as the table goes, the worst Premier League team of all time, I think, at this point in time. But you do have to back up and say for just one moment, within those words, you're still talking about a Premier League team. And as we know how the league has gone over the last few years, and this year is no different, of course, points are not free in the Premier League for anybody at this point in time. I watched Wolves the prior weekend play against Aston Villa.
Yeah,
They should have won, and
Yeah.
Emi Martinez kept Villa in that game quite a few occasions before they
Strand
pulled ahead.
Arsenal allowed goal too.
Yep. They got pretty unlucky in that. They might have beaten Villa, to be honest. But regardless, yes, they're not a great team. But as you said, United are only the second team besides City to score 4 goals against them. And with that, of course, United have the third most goals scored in the entire Premier League. So it's not like it's just Wolves or something like that. They are, they have the second most by a very narrow margin chances created in the whole league. Expected goals, third in goals scored. It's good signs. They're scoring goals and have for years we've talked about United can't score goals. It's not seeing the same issue there. There's some inconsistencies, but that's it seems like we do have genuine progress in that direction, and it was a good game against Wolves for that.
And I'm not going to lie, because yes, I'm this petty. There's some cosmic justice into Rob Edwards losing games of football, because that bastard's way too handsome to be for my fuck's sake. Oh, like fucking making sure I'm turning the TV off anytime it comes on. My lady's in the room. I get that looking off. Yes, you're right. I saw you tweet this stat yesterday about goals in contrast to this stage last season. It is definitely refreshing to see United, have a certain, a consistent run of form where they're scoring goals. And, it's not like it was under Ten Hag when United were winning games. We were winning them by very narrow 1-0 margins, 2-1 margins. There is definitely a broad variety of goals in this team. We talked about at Palace how important the goals were for Mason Mount and for Xerxes. We saw Mason Mount score again. A beautiful goal, by the way. I think, obviously, the confidence he would have gotten from the game against Palace would have helped him immensely. And then we saw Bumo, of course, break that minor drought. And Bruno Fernandes is one of the most bizarre goals you're going to see at penalties. So yes, James, I think
the Puskas award winner for next.
Yeah, without a striker to go and score 4 goals, an out striker, I'm really happy with that.
Yeah, and we were kind of talking how maybe Mbumo and such have been suffering a little bit with Cesco not being in the team. So it's good to, like you say, it's good to see without the striker there that the team's kind of coming together. And as well, it is a variety of goals, right? You've got kind of the pressing breakaway kind of goal that Bruno gets off of Cunha. Then you've got, Cunha into Dalot, into Mbumo. And then you've got which one was the third one? Then you've got Bruno crossing into Mason Mount. Then you've got Ahmad drawing a penalty. So every one of the attackers, if you consider the wingbacks, was involved in a goal yesterday, including Bruno. The entire front 6 players were all involved in a goal in some way or another. That's a very good sign when you start to spread out the versatility of creativity and attacks. And of course, Dalot probably should have had another early on, missing kind of point blank against the keeper there. But you know what? Dalot, he's strung a few good games together for me now. It's his best run of the season and in quite a while. He was still aggressive. He was still very good, I thought, in this game in general, being more attacking. But yeah, it's nice. It's nice when it's like you're not. I know Bruno ends up with 2 goals and the assist, right? Obviously, he scores the penalty, which just shouldn't be taken for granted. But it was a spread out attacking display among the entire unit of forwards, and probably could have also had another penalty in the first half too, by the way.
I'm sure Cesco must be looking at this going, of all the games, the run of games I didn't want to miss, it's this one. Because I'm sure he would have fancied himself. He'd be sitting on a different goal tally right now had he have been available in these games. He, has played the most difficult opposition. And if you're a striker, James, you're on a bit of a drought. Doesn't matter what level of football you're playing at. When you hear you're playing someone next week that's at the bottom of the league, it's music to your ears. It's like a warm blanket. You're like, yes, this. You go in there with a different level of confidence. Let's talk about the first half, because you're quite right with Dalot. I can't crucify Dalot for not being a clinical finisher. In the same way, I couldn't crucify Ahmad for not being defensively aware for Wolves' equaliser. I think you saw one of the consequences of him being a wing back and not being a defender. United in that first half, bucket load of chances, and we've said it time and time again, missing those chances, that that has an enormous cost. This is where the game gets lost. Then Wolves equalize. Tell me how you're feeling at that moment.
I was in 2 minds about it, because one, we continue to have this mental issue after scoring where they fall off, and they did in that first half. They scored, and then it was like slow down, walking pace, less intensity, less running, less everything. We concede to Wolves, and I'm not thinking about like, oh well, Wolves haven't scored in a month and that's how embarrassing or this and that. I'm just pissed off in the moment about how shit it is. And at halftime, I was very frustrated. I felt we'd probably go on to win the game, looking at how the first half went, because the gap between the two teams was so big. It didn't feel like, I guess, like Everton, where United conceded, but they weren't creating anything all game. Like, they didn't have any chances. They weren't doing crap with the ball. In this one, it felt like we were making so many chances through the first half, opportunities, that it would still come through. But I was upset. I was like, all right, the first 10 minutes out of the second half is going to tell me whether we're going to be at the end of this game looking at serious depression or not, You got muted there.
I was hitting the power button on the remote like it was skip out on Pornhub. Sorry. Deflation after they equalized, because you don't know what's coming next, and you're going. If United lose this game or draw it, in my opinion, Amorim, it seems silly because we're so close off top 4, but Amorim would have to look at that as maybe a inflection moment where, do I resign here? Because there's just no place to hide. I worry about United in situations where they're under immense pressure and expectation to win, and it's a total travesty if they lose, because you can just sense the nervousness that goes through the team, because they don't have a confidence in the team yet to get that result. They're good enough, of course, but United still have calamity in them. When that equalizer came, I'm looking at that going, completely deflated. Same story, not taking chances, giving a stupid goal away. And I think this is the most pivotal 45 minutes Amorim's had at United, where this 45 minutes cannot look anything like the West Ham or the Everton. This has to be an embarrassed Manchester United. And to be fair, Wolves were shocking. I felt sorry. I felt a bit sorry for some other fans. But, United came out, responded the right way, got the goals, and it felt good to have a comfort, a comfort level, enough of a gap between the two of us where you felt, okay, we can relax, enough distance between the two of us. Amorim came in for a bit of criticism over who he didn't play. Not bringing in academy players, not bringing in Shea Lacey. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a bigger picture on it as well. I would say on the one hand, he's not getting much credit for picking young Aiden Heaven again for this game after he struggled in the last one. And I thought Heaven did brilliantly in that game. Actually, I think he was really good. He was very brave with the ball. But, Aiden Heaven, obviously United went out. Look, it's not going to be a popular take, but United went out and bought 2 Arsenal academy players because they felt they didn't have the players in their own academy that would be ready for the first team environment in Aiden Heaven and Cheeto Obi last season, right? They brought them in and said, hey, we need players, and we don't have center backs that we feel confident in at the youth level. We don't have a striker we feel confident at the youth level. Right or wrong, that was the assessment that was made why they went out and brought these guys in. So I know they're not at the United Academy and they haven't come through that. But I think it's worthwhile, treating Aiden Heaven in a sense like that young player. He's not played much. I mean, he's debuted in the Premier League, as a United player and gotten those minutes and gotten a few really good games. And he's gotten the confidence to start in the center of that back three now 2 games in a row. So I think some credit is earned there on that. But there's another obvious factor we have to look into here, which is a challenge. And I know it's hard to know the exact right answer. When I looked at the substitutes, I said, well, let's look at it this way, right? Patrick Dorgu, next week, he's going to have to start.
Yeah.
Because Ahmad will be gone. That means Dallow's going to switch to the right because not only is Ahmad gone, but so is Mazraoui. That means next for a few stretch of games, it's guaranteed to be Dallow and Dorgu. So Dorgu's got to get on the pitch. He's got to find him some form because he's a guaranteed starter very soon. But the same goes for Lissandro and Yoro. De Ligt is still injured. He's still out. Maguire's still injured. He's still out. We're about to lose Mazraoui. That leaves us with Shaw, Heaven, Lissandro, and Yoro as our only 4 center backs. They all need some minutes in the belt, to get back into pace. We know why Lissandro needs minutes. That's a bit of a concern there. We have 4 fit center backs, and one of them's just come back from an ACL injury, right? That's a little light for a 3-man group once Mazraoui leaves.
2 of them are kids.
Yeah. They're 19 years old. So they need those minutes. And then, and the last one was, and then you have the same problem up front, which shows how light the squad is until Cesco comes back. Joshua Zirkzee probably starting in the front 3 with Cunha and Mason Mount. And so it's like you kind of needed all these players to come on because they all have to be playing, they all have to be active because most of them are going to be starting maybe by next week. We still don't have clarity on whether they're all going to be around for Bournemouth or not. We don't even know.
James, I'll be honest, right? I don't think you need to get enough credit for the Aiden Heaven signing, right? Yeah. First of all, you look at players that have cost an exorbitant amount of money that are centre backs in the Premier League, that Virgil van Dijk in recent times, lots of them don't look great. It's a very difficult position to play, especially when you're a young player. There's enormous pressure on you. Aiden Heaven cost United about $1 million from Arsenal. And yes, he is an academy player because he wasn't playing first team football at Arsenal. If he had played a number of first team games, then no, he's not an academy player. He hadn't made that transition yet. I think he had 1 substitute appearance for Arsenal, so that's not a first team footballer. So United progressed him into that. And I think if you look at his ratio of good games to bad games, I think I could probably point to 1 game that I can recollect off the top of my head where I thought not his best game. Every other time, that kid hasn't put a foot wrong. And in a back 3, like you said, that's constantly rotating. There's no consistency. He's got a new goalkeeper in behind him. You need to have a young when Dorgu plays another young left back. There's a lot of inexperience in that back 4. They're not or back 3, back 5, if you want to do it. There's not a lot of protection with United's midfield. And I don't think United get enough credit when they spend a lot of money on a player and it goes wrong. The media makes sure you know about it. And I don't think he gets enough credit. And Lissandro looked comfortable last night. He didn't look like a player that's been out. He looked very encouraging that he's made a positive recovery.
Yeah, for sure. That was really, really good to see. And It was really good to see, and I'm very happy about that. And another aspect I was thinking of in terms of how that back line has to play is you have this flipped issue now where with the players that are left, 3 out of 4 of them are left footers, which means he's got to keep trying Lissandro, Heaven, and Shaw all being left footed. And he's got to keep trying. Now he's got to try lefties in the middle when he's been using Maguire and De Ligt for a long time as right footed players there. So you kind of have a funny situation. And I think that's a big reason why he's in swap. You know, he's always swapped around center backs, to be fair, because it's a demanding position in a system. But I think especially now, they really needed to play. And like we see, I think Lissandro, even though the sub for Lissandro against West Ham was very, very highly criticized, understandably more because of the circumstances around all of it, he helps United attack. Lissandro does quite significantly in the confidence he plays on the ball and how quick he is to move the ball forward into the areas you want out of the back as well. So it's good to see Lissandro get on the pitch and produce, because it helps when he's on his game.
Yeah, I mean, to have 3 left-footed centre-backs, I forgot that he didn't have him was left-footed, which is another major attribute, considering United had a major, dearth of options in that position. And whenever they were trying to play right-footers in the left-footed centre-back role, James, it looked like a fish riding a bike. They were completely out of place. And first of all, it's hard to get left-footers at all, but to get a £1 million accomplished centre back that's left footed, absolutely unbelievable. I don't know who's here, but
yeah, I know it is difficult getting those left footers into the team, and obviously United's still lacking them in a few other kind of positions. I think in the midfield, ideally you'd have a balance with lefties and right footers, but we don't have it there. To have it obviously with Ahmad and Mbeumo on the right, having those left footers, but it's been a challenge for a long time. And of course, Mbeumo, another recent purchase. Ahmad, someone who wasn't featuring for a long time. Dorgu, they've brought in a bunch of lefties actually if you think about it, over the last bit of time, because it was a huge problem for a while.
Very much so. I'm totally out of breath because sorry, my dog's barked there. My gardener left my gate open. I'm a fucking dog get out down the street. So, running up the stairs and nearly have a fucking heart attack here. Jesus Christ. But yes, it is very encouraging to see that type of depth on the left-hand side, especially when we're playing a 3. You have to have a left-footed centre-back. One thing that's been quite interesting, James, is the fact that Casemiro's not seeing out 90 minutes. We're not seeing him being taken off in games the way we did before. Whereas,
he was subbed against Wolves, right? He was subbed against Wolves.
Well, but prior to that, he's been finishing all 90-minute games. He's been playing right to the end. I mean, he was able to be taken off against Wolves because United had a comfortable lead. But prior to that, in games where he's been pivotal, were in close games. How does he have the legs to finish out 90 minutes now?
I don't think he does, but I think that it's been burnt. You know what I mean? Because you had these games where you had kind of a few games in a row, actually. There was Brighton was the first one, even though United pulled the win out there. They were 3-0 up. He comes off, and United go down to 3-2. Then they get the goal at the end to win 4-2. Then you had Spurs where they get the lead, and then they concede twice in quick succession after Casemiro comes off. And then I think since then, this was the first time he was subbed in these games. Maybe he was against Everton. They were down to 10 men. I don't recall, but he definitely wasn't against Palace and West Ham. So yeah, I don't think he does have the legs for 90. I don't think he has the legs for 60, if I'm quite honest, but that's just me. But regardless, yeah, it's been a requirement. United need to be in a situation where hopefully they can do something about that.
There was interesting photographs. I never got a chance to see if there was an actual video of this, of a testy interaction between Ratcliffe and Wilcox after the Wolves equalizer. Do you have any more?
Was it at that moment? I was never able to get even like an exact confirmation of the time of it, in terms of when it happened. But we can Mad Libs the thing in terms of what's being said there. It is funny though. I for some reason I have this tickle in the back of my mind that I remember this happening before. I remember them being photographed in what looked like a very intense conversation, And then I remember it being reported on later as it was not a negative conversation, but they were talking about like, it was just a passion. Anyway, who knows? Who knows? I mean, I could see some anger in that moment, I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah, no. Listen, I don't think there's anything wrong with
Yeah.
having emotional disagreements and
Mhm.
having diversity of opinion and stuff. But to do it publicly, James, I mean, both of them are well aware that that's something that is going to create headlines. That your professionalism. We're all human beings, so it's it's not possible to not make mistakes and not have arguments in public and keep everything behind closed doors. But I think that they're both experienced and well aware enough to know that crossing that threshold and doing it in public, that has to be an extremely emotive issue, and there has to be a moment of indifference towards the consequences of that.
Probably. And I would say that would probably be spurred by Sir Jim, because we've seen Omar and Wilcox at many games very stone-faced, regardless of what's going on, arms crossed, sitting watching and nothing much happening. We kind of know from
at a Thanksgiving dinner watching two families on the political
shit. They've brought up the politics everybody's talking about, no. But no, I would suggest it's that. I mean, look, we do know from the past, obviously, that like it or dislike it, Sir Jim tends to be, he speaks his mind. He's obviously, from a football standpoint, he's very much, he is a fan. He is a fan from a football perspective. We've seen him in a lot of games, whether he's discussing with people or not. We've seen him, hand over his eyes as United have conceded again and it's gone to shit. And he's like depressed I mean, we've seen him go through all the stages of emotion that United fans do in the stands. We've seen him in interviews say things you go, yeah, well, maybe I wouldn't have said that, but he's just kind of how he is. So I would imagine that's Omar and Jason, I think in general, when you look at them at the games, they're usually very not up or down. It certainly is Sir Jim doesn't seem to care quite so much about what happened.
I have no problems with him, singularly reacting to United, negatively reacting to goals, like, whatever his gestures are. I just think that for two people of that, standing in repute to be arguing in public is to me revealing. Like, I mean, sure, shit like that happens all the time in every office, every business across the world. Happens in every house across the world. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a major crisis. In fact, sometimes, as David Moyes said with his Everton team, when two players are fighting on the pitch, sometimes you want to see that type of passion. And I suppose you could interpret it another way and say, well, it's good to see that Ratcliffe doesn't just blindly accept what Wilcox says, and there is passionate discussion. But what do you think they were arguing about?
I mean, it's probably nothing like what we think, right? But if I were to look at that moment, I would say, you could easily dub it, you could easily make a case that I'd be screaming about those old midfielders that Sir Jim's previously spoken about in the past, even before he came into the club, as having his concerns about. I mean, I know I'm not saying it was acceptable, right? Because we've debated this before, but Sir Jim spoke about his concerns about Casemiro and the age profile of buying him 3 years ago, and he's still starting in our midfield, and we still haven't bought a midfielder. I could say that there's a concern there. Maybe that was it. I don't know. It's muted again there, buddy.
Sorry, man. I think with that, I look at Casemiro relative to other players. I still don't understand why he's singled out, James, as some type of example of horrendous business. Because to me, if you evaluated his transfer right now, I'd say that was a net positive.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that it's sort of a funny thing when you look at United in general, because I think that you can look at like there's two different ways of looking at it, right? Like, I think Casemiro maybe is representative of an overall bad philosophy rather than him being a bad player in terms of transfers, because obviously, for so many years we've ended up, we chase the big names, we buy an older player, we pay big wages, and then we never end up with a squad that has consistency and longevity. Like even harking back to like Zlatan, right? If you take that, I thought Zlatan was great at United for the 1 year that, he was great prior to the injury. And I loved having him there, and he was a joy to watch. It still spoke to a bad transfer philosophy, the whole concept of it. You know what I mean? And we've done, that's kind of my opinion on that. That's my take on it, is like, there's things that you go on and say someone might fall into the category of they fit under a bad transfer philosophy. It doesn't make them a bad, it doesn't mean they didn't apply positives to the team or something like that. And I would put Casemiro in there because if you look at our midfield, it's a combined age of 67 years old between the two of the two players in our midfield. And they do, and they're getting outrun every single week. And there's nothing we can do about that. But that problem's been there for a long time. The lack of investment in the midfield. I mean, we bought Nemanja Matic too late. It's like we've been doing this forever, buying these players. We bought Christian Eriksen on a free. It was still late. He got one more injury and that was the end of it. He couldn't, it was like, we've done this for a long time. So, and here's the thing, right?
What, Donny van de Beek?
Yeah, well, I consider Christian Eriksen was good when he joined us, and he played well for us, and he provided a lot of good moments, but it didn't last. And in the long run, it was the overall philosophy of getting him was wrong, and he was free. It wasn't like crazy expensive or anything. So I think it falls into that category. Is it's just more a symbol of the poor way that United have planned their squad and transfers for such a long time that leads to always needing so much in the market.
They constantly get the midfield wrong because of the nature and the chronological order of their recruitment.
Yeah.
Because when you're getting, first of all, you build from the defense. Midfield has to be built around a very well-defined ideology and formation, and you have to be very specific in the midfielders that you buy that are designed to play, give you a percentage, benefit adjuvant in that particular system. Yes, players can be flexible. They play multiple systems. They do that for their international teams. But to win at this level consistently, you need to be a specialist. I mean, if Pep Guardiola took over Luton Town, he's not playing tiki-taka because he doesn't have the fucking player to do it, right? Yep. Sure, players could adapt to it, but not to a level where they're going to consistently win. So, I think that's where United have always gone wrong. They keep banning midfield for a different team.
Yeah.
And so that's, to me, that's the heartbeat. And you have to get everything else right before that. So some other... I want to quickly talk about Bruno Fernandes, because Bruno Fernandes, James, gets 2 yesterday. His record, 102 goals, 92 assists, and 306 appearances. The highest rated player in Premier League history over the course of 150 games, of an average rating of about 7.33. What a signing.
Yeah, I mean, his contributions have been unbelievable over the years, and he was a January signing as well, which somebody should get the hint on that and consider that for what it's worth. But yeah, incredible long contributions over the length of time. Obviously, I still find it ironically similar, because when Ollie started, his first season was prior to Bruno was really, really rough. And Bruno was the most clear, has been and was the most clear turnaround for a team that one individual brought that I've seen at United in terms of a signing post Sir Alex. Like the impact he had on that from where it was to turning it around, and what he's done since then. He's very consistent in the production of what he creates on the ball in terms of goals and assists that not many people can match it, huh?
Nah, he was an accelerant, James. He was almost Cantona-esque influence on United, in the way he was a catalyst that completely transformed. And sometimes that's all you need. You need one player that provides a spark that, you get that momentum with everything else. Mason Mount, I said, let's talk about him 2 weeks ago. he's answered questions.
Mm-hmm.
Magnificent goal, but generally speaking, this is the best he's looked in the United shirt.
Yeah, it is by far the best he's looked in United shirt and the best that he's played in some times. And when he looks like the way that he's playing in a game like this, you just go, damn, I mean, that's why so many managers rate him and so many coaches think he's just a top player and why he was unbenchable essentially for what Thomas Tuchel in that Champions League run and things like that, because he's just, when he's on it, he's that good. And I think it's really a question of fitness and consistency. If he can stay fit as he has as best as he has at United so far right now, he's just getting better and better as the weeks go on and we start to see that.
I think one of the things that I really liked about that goal was the way it came from open play, the way there looked to be some type of cohesion and chemistry between Mason Mount and Bruno Fernandes that caught the opposition by surprise. Look, we know how bad Wolves were, but it felt like that was something that came off a training ground. That was something that wasn't just a serendipitous moment. It was something that was a result of a clear understanding between the two. Brilliant to see that type of goal coming from open play. I wanted to ask you about Benjamin Cesco's agent's comments, because far too often when we're reading agents' comments, they're perfidious, they're naughty, they're subtly suggestive, and they're rarely supportive. Really refreshing to see an agent come out, speak eloquently and respectfully about the football club his client pays for, which to me is like such an open goal. It should be easy. And one of the things I didn't like in that article, I think it was Sam Luckhurst that did it, was there was a very clear criticism of Cesco and United when it said Cesco was United's fourth choice striker in the market after Delap and Ollie Watkins and what have you, which I think was a bit unfair because, as we've said before, Cesco's probably a player that United have scouted more than any other, and I've had a standard interest in Cesco for a long, long time. So, I was really encouraged to see the things that his agent said yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, even on that thing with regards to fourth choice and stuff like that, I mean, you have to also bear in mind the variety of factors that come into that, like price, financial ability, things like that. Like, you look at someone and say, right or wrong, Liam Delap was a 30 million release clause. So of course you look at a Premier League player, 30 million release clause viewed as really good value. It changes, but it doesn't speak to the quality necessarily of the player in the way that clubs go after things, because they were spending big money on Cunha and spending big money on Mbeumo and, and doing things like that. It doesn't always speak to the same direction. So definitely a bit unfair. But yeah, I tweeted that as well, that I was very...
Sorry, mate. Cantona wasn't first choice.
Yeah.
Ronaldo wasn't first choice. Ronaldinho was. David Hurst.
I mean, Bruno Fernandes wasn't first choice. We ended up going for him in January. We were just speaking about him the prior summer. We tried to get Paulo Dybala and Christian Eriksen and ended up pushing it off to January and getting Bruno, and he's better than all. He's the best of the three. So it's like
Salah wasn't Klopp's first choice.
Exactly.
That to me is not, that to me is not a criticism or
for sure. It's lame. Right? It's definitely lame. And it was really, really refreshing to see it. Like you said, an agent come in and they're not, sharpening the knives and stabbing them in and doing all this and the things that sometimes do happen with agents, whether it's directly from them or via other people and things like that as well. But I think that the part that I liked from him, that I do think is really important to grasp, and people can agree with it, disagree with it, and all of that, but I think what's important about it is not necessarily whether you agree with it or not. But when he was talking about how it's difficult to explain in such a big club, everyone wants immediate results, but this team deserves time. Progress is clear compared to last season. I believe next year will be even better. And another year later, we can realistically expect to push for the Premier League title. He wasn't sold on bullshit. You know what I'm saying? By the club in terms of joining. That's, I think, really important. They didn't sit and say to him, you know what, join us and we'll challenge for a title right away and sell you on that concept like we're there. And it's a two sides of that, which is one, they laid out realistic expectations, not this year, not next year, the following year. That's when we want to be ready, consistent with the message that they've given out there. But it also means that young Cesco is joining for the right reason, that he understanding it's a process. We're going to go, and he's not going to be sitting there going, oh my God, I'm here and we're in sixth, and I'm pissed off and upset because I expected to join title winners, or, you know, things like that. We've talked in the past about broken promises to players, things that have been said in recruitment and contract negotiations, and then the rug is pulled from under them, and it's like it fractures that relationship. I think it speaks to, you know, the quality and the integrity of the agent and the player in this case, but also it's a positive for the club. That, you know, that what they say is what they're saying behind closed doors is the same as what they're saying to us as fans, is the same as what they're saying to agents in terms of the plan, the direction, and everything.
Yeah, there's definitely, you know, a correlation with reality, and that's important because when you're setting incentive structures and contracts, you can't be saying we'll get another 10 grand a week when you win the league, or 20. That has to be commensurate with reality, that, you know, goals are going to be achieved in this type of order. We're not going to go from a team struggling to, you know, 16th to win the league, right? You know, Cesco came in the season after United's worst Premier League season ever. So there was a very clear understanding of the condition that United are in. And maybe that's the time you want to join, because that's also the United team you can get into. And I think we also we forget how young he is, James. You know, you look at people like Didier Drogba, where was he at his age? You know, Mateta, players like that. These players, you know, Drogba was playing second division in France. You know, turns out to be one of the best target men in the Premier League ever. United's unforgivable at this age.
What about Jamie Vardy?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, is like we all correlate development with Football Manager, right? You know, 22, 23, you know, that's the peak of your development, and then, you know, it's a fully marinated steak at that point, and it's, to me, like, that's just not the way human development works. Another exciting young player, JJ Gabriel, mate. FA Youth Cup going on right now, and he has scored against Peterborough under 18s. It's going. I know we talked about this in the podcast on Friday about the fact that he's too young to play this season, but I do worry about the type of pressure that's being put on that young lad's shoulders.
Yeah, the expectations grow every single game, and everything that's, you know, in the FA Youth Cup, and it'll be televised. And I mean, of course, famously, it was Garnacho who scores the winner in the FA Youth Cup to build the hype to kind of a crescendo in the season before he broke into the team, for United to have won that for the first time in a while. I think it was when he did that, a long time, from what I remember. And that was what, 4 years ago, something like that. I remember watching it, and it was the most hype you'd seen, and fervor. And I'm not saying undeserved. It wasn't just Garnacho, but the support for the youth team at that time had reached a big crescendo, and there was, you know, the stadium had tons of people in it, and it was really cool, actually. But it was a really cool moment, the whole thing. But, you know, the JJ Gabriel is being looked at with everything, with such a I think a bit of an unprecedented at United level of you know, of eyes, right, all around. I mean, I don't think we've had kids that have had deals with Nike and things like that at 14 years old, and the way that it's all been presented, and, you know, it's, I worry too, but I'm not, you know, I don't want to like put a negative thought on it, you know what I mean, at all. But I hope it's, you know, it is a lot. It is a lot for a young kid, and, you know,
the variables you can't, you know, predict, James, are the player's milieu outside of, you know, football, what his environment is like. You know, just one or two differentials can have enormous outcomes. How do they sleep? How do they eat? How do they psychologically deal with pressure? How are they dealing with social media? Who are their agents? Who are their influences? Just one of those things goes wrong, and you have completely different outcomes, and those are the things you can't gauge. You know, United have had exceptional talent before that self-destructed, you know, Raven Morrison being one of them. You just can't gauge how they're going to handle that type of pressure and expectation, but nonetheless, very, very encouraging. Johnny Evans also stepped down from a role that I'm not even sure what you do in it, were loans and pathways. He's wanted to spend more time with his family. Do you think he stepped down from that role because it was essentially a dead rubber role, or do you think that it's legitimate about just wanting to spend time with his family?
I would lean towards the latter. I think sometimes people, they finish the football and they think I'm not ready to leave the football. And then they start to think,
Leave before it leaves
hang
you?
on a second. And then they start to think, you know what, maybe I am ready to leave the football, spend some time at home. Because how when you've been doing something for such a long time, it's really hard to stop that habit, that pattern. Every moment of your thought process is football, is this or it's that. And then the second it stops for a bit, you go, I can't let it stop. I've got to do something. And then maybe it's just realizing, you know what? This doesn't have the same high as being on the pitch and doing the things that I've done in my career, calling around to organize academy loans and things. Maybe it's just not for me right now. And because I think he said in the past too that he would prefer to be more, he would like to do something with regards to management in the future. And I think a role, with like being a coach, a manager, you're on the ground, you're on the pitch. You can see how the most coaches are ex-players, right? There's the same, you can give the same emotion, the same intensity. You can be there, you're in the talks and you get everything. Administrative roles, I think, are a lot harder for people to like mentally wrap their brain around after being an athlete for some time. So I would suspect it's something more like that. And it's just not for me. And I bet Johnny will return to some sort of role in football that's a bit more active at some point in the future, not knowing anything myself, but just from his words in the past.
Well, what's interesting about that, James, is of course he's not part of this particular group, but we saw some stories come out about players recoiling of the criticism of people of the class of 92, whenever they see Scholes and, Nicky Butt and other players, Gary Neville, being very pointed with their criticism and the fact that there's some rift with them inside Old Trafford. I know that to be true in terms of them not be they're the reason why Ryan Giggs didn't get the job full time, and how there was some suspicion of the class of 92. But what's your reaction to the players and their aversion to the criticism of United pundits?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because we have heard, before in the past, we have heard this concern about ex-players and these kinds of things. And we do know it's a bit of an issue, and it's been worrying. I mean, I don't want to necessarily get into rehashing the Kobbie Mainoo thing a little bit, but you look at stuff like Nicky Butt and Paul Scholes talking about Kobbie Mainoo should go to Chelsea. I think that's some of the dumbest commentary I've ever heard in my life, honestly. And I'm not even, and obviously it's that's different to some of the things like the criticism about that Scholes give Lissandro, things like that are out there. But it's still the same. I don't know. I haven't placed a lot of value personally in hearing from ex-players talk about United. I haven't seen that it's been worth much. And I can understand why people at the club and such might feel the same about that.
To me, James, you look at the overlap, which is 60% the United podcast.
Yeah.
And there's no other football club in the Premier League that has this many voices, that has this level of, compounded criticism with, these types of, platforms. There's not 6, 7, class of 92 Liverpool players on talk and just laying into Liverpool, as a football club. Even Jamie Carragher's very censored, a moderated criticism of Mo Salah was enough to provoke a confrontation between the two. There's no one else has to deal with that level of scrutiny. And one of the things that I don't like about the class of 92 is there are constant comparisons between what they would have done and what players today. Class of 92, they're sitting there laying into players for being unprofessional, and then 5 minutes later telling a story about them being drunk and partying and missing, coming in and missing curfews and being drunk and getting in this fight and okay, you can argue and say, well, they could do that, we're winning the league, but they didn't have to deal with social media. I hear some of the stories that Wayne Rooney tells about things that went on.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, yeah, but for just a fraction of that, players today would get absolutely annihilated. And I just think they're unfair comparisons.
Yeah, they are unfair comparisons. It's a different world, different environment. We've talked about that with regards to the criticism in social media in the past, that a lot of them act like it's comparable, even some of the things that a lot of them went through compared to nowadays in terms of it's just a totally different world, and I even find it, I just find it weird. And in a lot of sense, it's kind of like we were just talking about Cesco's agent, right? And I also look at that and I go, like, I hate doing it. I hate even like saying it this way, but like, it feels very opportunistic, that it's so easy, to be against United and against the club and push and try to make things worse when you have a voice and you have the opportunity and the stature, the platform, the position to make things better for the club that you played for, the club that you loved, and things like that. And sometimes I wonder about the loyalty. Like, I'll say this for Jamie Carragher, right, on that front. He's had his things with Salah and whatnot and all that. But I watch the punditry when I see it, and he's always light on Liverpool compared to what they should. He lets them off easy very, very often, and he tends to be overly complimentary of Liverpool, of the team. He tends to be, I guess what I would say in that sense is, I'm saying he appears to show a bit of loyalty, not giving over much praise to Jamie Carragher, but he tends to show a bit of loyalty to the club itself and to everything. And when I look at United pundits, I'm often thinking they act like they hate the club sometimes, like that they hate it and they want it to fail. It's bizarre to me but that's the impression I get from not all, but many. They're so over the top with the criticism of everything all the time. And I don't quite understand that.
I feel like Gary Neville in his punditry is apologizing for the success United had during his career.
Yeah.
Where almost
like he's ashamed. Like,
yeah. And we've all seen this where people overcorrect and go out of their way to try to prove there's no bias that comes across as phony and sycophantic.
Yes.
And I see that with Neville, where I'm like, fan, you get a little bit of divided loyalties when United play Liverpool, and you'll get the odd, how would I say this? The odd moan out of Gary Neville when United score a goal, right? That I could do without. But other than that, like, I listened to a lot of the criticism. This is a guy that was sitting down with Erik ten Hag after 2 defeats. Where's his conversation with Slot? And if I know we all have these warped perspectives, but they're not always wrong. If Florian Wirtz played for United, even if United were walking the league, Florian Wirtz would be getting annihilated, James.
Oh, yeah.
No one at United has been spared that level of criticism. Yep. Even players that cost a fraction of that. He's very, very lucky that that's not the case. All right, Mitty, I think we are done here. Do we have anything else to cover before we leave?
No, I think that's about it. Otherwise, we'll be talking again after Bournemouth next week.
Apologies for the interruption in the middle of this podcast. Unfortunately, my dog got out due to my gardener, so I had to run and grab him. All right, man, we'll be back again next week. Thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast, your likes, retweets, everything else. All the best, James.
Yes, see you later.
Cheers, buddy.